It's finally Friday.
It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
All right, welcome back to the Friday Show, presented by Woodbine Racetrack. I'm Scott Jagow, along with Ray Paulick. Glad to have you with us. Coming up, we'll talk a little bit about vet records and transparency. But first, Ray, the Triple Crown is in the books. We had 3 different winners. We had 1 horse compete in all 3. And as usual at this time of year, there's some outcry for changing the Triple Crown schedule. Randy Moss from NBC is the latest to make suggestion in that respect. Where do you come down on making changes to the Triple Crown?
I happen to agree with Randy, and I have a lot of respect for him. He's covered horse racing for decades. The Triple Crown isn't broken, but it can be made better, and I think you can make it better by putting more time in between races. It wasn't always set up this way with the first Saturday in May for the Derby, 2 weeks later the Preakness, 3 weeks later to the Belmont. It's moved around over history. Let's move it again. Let's add more time. Let's look at the reality, which is horses don't run back in 2 weeks anymore. So let's look at that reality and say, what can we do? Let's spread it out a little bit. Randy says run the Preakness on Memorial Day, run the Belmont on the 4th of July. To me, that a schedule like that works a lot better than what we have right now.
Of course, doing that would probably kill the Haskell. So you've got to take that into consideration. My argument against what you're saying, and I have argued for this in the past, is not traditionalism. As you suggested, it's not always been the same schedule. The Belmont used to be 4 weeks after the Preakness. In fact, the Preakness probably will be at Laurel Park in a couple of years instead of Pimlico. So things do change over time, and it does not soil the accomplishment of the previous Triple Crown winners or make it easier. It certainly wouldn't make it easier. You can't make that argument when horses would have more time to recuperate. My argument against it is that you're being an enabler by changing the Triple Crown schedule. And by that I mean you're enabling the breeding industry to keep breeding horses that aren't quite as sound as they used to be. You're enabling the vets to keep making the ridiculous argument that we need Lasix in the sport on race day. And we know the dehydrating effect of Lasix and what that can mean for recovery time. And you're enabling the trainers to keep going along with this idea of not racing every few weeks. So to me, that is the biggest problem. Changing the Triple Crown schedule doesn't fix the underlying problems that the sport has.
Yeah, I guess we're dealing with the symptoms, not the actual cause. So maybe one thing we can do. Are we ever going to get rid of Lasix? Probably not. I wish we could. I don't know why America can't do what the rest of the world does all year, all over the world. They race without Lasix on race day. I don't know why American racing is inferior in that regard. And let's face it, we are inferior in that regard. We must give horses a drug the day they race. No other country does that, especially in its major races.
And give it to almost all horses, as if they all have this bleeding problem, right. Which of course is not true. It's actually that it's a performance enhancing drug that everyone wants to use because everyone else is using it.
Right. So instead of dealing with that, let's, for the time being at least, go back to what was done 20 years ago when Chrysler became a sponsor of the Triple Crown and have $1 million bonus. Maybe $1 million isn't enough. $1 million isn't what it used to be, apparently. Have some sort of an incentive bonus for horses that participate in all 3 and compile the top 3, the top finishes, some kind of a point system like they had with the Triple Crown Challenge. We got to do something because we need rivalries in the business, and you're not going to have a rivalry if you don't get the Derby winner and the Preakness winner in the Belmont. You end up with low TV ratings like we had this last week.
It's a valid point. I think perhaps, though, the incentives might be better placed in a way to have 3-year-olds race as a 4-year-old. I don't know how to do that. I'm just saying if I was to suggest any incentives, it would be to keep horses racing longer so those rivalries can happen. But then we also have an older horse division that's pretty good because right now it frankly stinks besides Arrogate.
Right.
and incentivizing them to run in the Triple Crown races, it still doesn't solve the underlying problems. They're still not sound enough to do so. And people who make the argument that Classic Empire would have won the Belmont, it would have been his 4th race in 8 weeks against fresh horses going 12 furlongs. I don't think so. So if you have an incentive and he shows up in the race and runs up the track or gets injured, then you have a problem.
Well, and that's why they got rid of the bonus, because a horse did break down in the Belmont, and it was Prairie Bayou going in his 3rd Triple Crown race, and it was kind of a somber moment when they presented $1 million check to Paul Mellon. He quickly gave it away to a charity, but I think you have to run that risk. I think you have to run the risk of giving somebody an incentive, and they're not going to run a horse if they think there's something wrong with him, because these horses are valuable. And $1 million or $2 million, whatever the bonus is going to be, is not going to make someone run a horse that shouldn't be running.
All right, what do you think about this? Take the poll on our website. Should they do nothing? Should the Triple Crown stay the way it is? Should they spread it out a little farther, change the dates, or create incentives for horses to run in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown? So let's move on, Ray, and talk a little bit about something that happened before the Belmont. The vet records came out online. Everyone could see all the Belmont starters and what medications they were getting and so forth. And the one that stood out was Epicharis, the Japanese horse who would end up being scratched because there was some suggestion of lameness on that report. There's been a call since then, let's make these vet records available for every race. What do you think?
Well, number one, if these records weren't available for Epicharis and the horse ran and didn't run well at all, that would have been basically defrauding the public, I think, because he obviously had a problem. He was given bute a few days before the race, and to treat a problem, the problem never did clear up. He failed the vet inspection and didn't run. But just think of it the other way. If he had run and these records weren't available, I mean, that's something to think about. However, American racing is not prepared for transparency. First of all, there are some issues with vet-client confidentiality. And number two, we can't even get states to coordinate their veterinary lists. You have a horse that's put on the vet's list for unsoundness in one state. His trainer ships him to another state and races him. It's unbelievable that in this day and age, with computer technology, with the ability to talk to each other so easily, we can't even stop that from happening. So this is such a big ask. Of course, in an ideal world, we'd want to do this, but we're not prepared for this kind of stuff. We should be, but we're not.
But the vet-client confidentiality, what are you talking about? I mean, this is a sport where people bet on the horses. They need to have all the information that's available about each of these horses. That's nonsense to me.
It took 5 or 6 years in California to get third-party Lasix administration approved because of some obstinate veterinarians who put their heels in the ground and said, you can't turn this over to a third party because this is my patient and you're messing. So with something as big as this, veterinarians are gonna try to stop it and hire lawyers and tie it up in the courts for a long time. It'll never happen here. We can talk about it, but until we get some sort of overriding central authority, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we saw what happened with the American Association of Equine Practitioners opposing the Tonko bar legislation on the basis of the Lasix issue. Like,
right.
they dig, like you said, they dig their heels in. No matter how nonsensical their argument is, they make this argument, and right, they're going to oppose it, and that might drag the bill down. I don't know. I mean, maybe the bill doesn't have much chance of passing in the first place, but this continuing cycle of being defensive and going up against any form of change for a sport that clearly needs it is very discouraging to me.
Yeah, if you're in favor of the status quo, I'm sorry, you're a hopeless loser. That's all I can say about that. And AAP are well-intentioned, but they are wrong on this issue. We have a serious problem that needs to be handled in some sort of a national way, not government, but national. And for the AEP to say, well, we kind of like it in principle, but Lasix.
Right.
It's just stupid.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the Friday Show. Let us know what you think. Thanks for joining us. The Friday Show, presented by Woodbine Racetrack. We'll see you next time.